Thank you very much, and it's a great pleasure for me to be able to introduce the main challenge that you all will be facing in the next 2 days. So the scope and the problem of anti-Semitism in today's Europe, but trying to also think about the scope of this problem beyond the borders of our continent. When we look at the research, survey research performed in many countries, we very often see that the problem of anti-Semitism is still not gone. It still exists in Europe. For example, in a recent survey where the question whether people in these countries would accept Jews as their neighbors, based on representative sample studies in different countries, it was found that actually in some of the countries in Europe, almost every fourth person would not accept or declares that would not accept a Jewish person as a potential neighbor. And you can see that Poland, Slovak Republic, Slovak Republic, Slovenia, Czech Republic, and Bulgaria were among the countries that had the highest number of people who declared very high social distance toward Jews. Commerce Institute did a study quite recently together with CNN looking at the levels of anti-Semitism in Europe. And for example, they asked participants of this study whether they think that contemporary anti-Semitism is actually caused by the behavior of Jews themselves. So these are Jews who are responsible for anti-Semitism. And you can see that in Poland or in Hungary, more than 20% of participants said yes to such a statement. They responded positively to it. They said, yes, these are Jews who should be blamed for anti-Semitism. In the same study of Comres, a question was asked whether Jews are trying to achieve some goals by using the Holocaust. So this is what we call secondary anti-Semitism, the belief that Jews are abusing the Holocaust history to gain some instrumental goals, to achieve some instrumental goals. And here you can see that in Poland, every second participant of the study, so every second person, because it was a representative study, nationwide representative study, every second person said yes to that question. But in several other countries like Hungary, Sweden, or Austria, every third participant would also agree that Jews are exploiting the Holocaust. Now, looking at it from a different perspective, so not looking at the studies of majorities, religious and ethnic majorities in these countries, but looking at Jews themselves, I find it even more shocking when looking at the data collected by the Fundamental Rights Agency in the project in which I was involved in Poland, a project that measured attitudes and views of Jewish people living in different countries, in different European countries. We asked Jewish participants whether they think that anti-Semitism has increased a lot within the last 5 years. You can see that in almost all European countries, there is 1/3 or more of Jews who say, yes, within the last 5 years, anti-Semitism increased a lot. And in such countries as France, Germany, Belgium, or Poland, there's more than 60%, so it's approximately 2/3 of Jews who declare that anti-Semitism is on the rise. In the same study, we asked also participants about anti-Semitic hate speech, whether they have heard anti-Semitic comments being said by politicians in political debates in their countries. And in such countries as Poland, the UK, Belgium, and Hungary, you see that more than 30% of participants declare that yes, they have heard such language. And it's very striking because you can see that, as we know, in the UK, it was present much more on the left wing of political sphere. In Poland, it was present much more on the right wing of political sphere. Nevertheless, this is the language to which Jews are exposed to in their home countries from their politicians. And also very specific anti-Semitic stereotypes. For example, this broad conspiracy theory, very frequent in many places in Europe, about Jews who want to get control over politics, Jews who want to get control over economy. The Jews have too much power in my country. have we heard statements like that from our non-Jewish neighbors? This is a very shocking truth. This is a statement to which in almost all European countries Jews are exposed to. And majority of Jews has declared that they have heard such a statement within last year. Okay, these are just numbers, but what are the consequences of that? We did some more deep analysis of that, and we found that actually those Jews who have experienced hate speech, who have heard anti-Semitic statements like this one about Jews who have too much power, etc., those people are more often thinking about emigration. They would probably consider leaving their countries. And even more shocking is that the hate speech exposure, so being exposed to hate speech, to anti-Semitic hate speech, is a stronger antecedent of willingness to emigrate than crime level in their countries, than unemployment, than immigration, and sense of government's corruption. So you can see that this is even a stronger reason for Jews to think about emigration than some issues which we consider to be very important and major causes of people's international mobility. What did we also learn from all of these studies? We've learned that anti-Semitism is very different in the East and in the West. In the West, anti-Semitism comes mostly from the radicalized members of Muslim communities and also from the radical left. It's very often combined with a risk of personal attacks on the members of Jewish communities. In the east of Europe, it's much more often expressed by Christian populations and by the right-wing extremists. Here, it is not so often risk of personal violent attacks, but rather hate speech or desecrations of Jewish memorial sites. On the other hand, as I showed you, being exposed to hate speech has also strong detrimental consequences, and we also found in other studies that it also affects the mental health of minorities who are affected by hate speech. What is universal in the East and in the West of Europe is that anti-Semitism has a very strong component of conspiracy theories. And a widespread and more universal element of that is Holocaust revisionism, or the denial of the fact that any inhabitants of a given country were in any way involved in crimes committed against Jews. When we think about anti-Semitism, it is also necessary to point out that anti-Semitism is part of a broader phenomenon. These are studies conducted by Andreas Zick already 10 years ago, looking on different forms of xenophobia and hatred in Europe. He did it in many European countries, and he found that actually all of these arrows are representing a very strong correlation, strong and significant correlation. And you can see that all of them are very strongly correlated. If somebody is a sexist, it's highly possible that that person would be also a racist, a homophobe, would be anti-Semitic, anti-Muslim, and anti-immigrant. So in Europe, it's more or less one coherent component which we usually tend to call group-focused enmity, a hatred toward all others. Also in Poland, a representative study that we've done a few years ago showed that anti-Semitism is also very closely linked to other forms of hatred. People who are anti-Semitic are also very often homophobic. They are also against Roma minority, they're sexist, and they are anti-immigrant. Taking it all into account, you can understand how touching one point of this structure can make salient other points of this structure. I will give you an example which was already provided here by Director Stępiński. The example comes from the city of Wrocław. During anti-immigrant rally in 2015, one of the organizers of that rally came with an effigy representing a Hasidic Jew. He burned this effigy in the middle of anti-immigrant Islamophobic rally. Why did he do that? Wouldn't it make any sense? We could think that if somebody supports Israel in the Middle East, he probably would be more against the Arab states. Or maybe if somebody is more against Arab, probably would be more supportive to Israel. This is completely not true in Europe. That person, when he was put on trial, declared, I burned this effigy because this represented George Soros, the Jewish financier. I'm sure that nobody have ever seen George Soros wearing payas and Stremel and all the Hasidic uniform. But this was his way to tell us that he protests against the liberal powers represented by Jewish financiers that are posing threat to European civilization because of bringing here immigrants from Muslim countries. This would be a single incident if you have not seen the communiques coming from terrorists responsible for attacking the Pittsburgh synagogue, for the attack in the synagogue in California, and for other violent attacks on Jewish places. Most of them say that they are attacking not only Jews, but they are attacking the threat that Jews pose on the Western civilization by bringing the immigrants to these countries. So you can see how these ideologies of hatred are closely related, that what we see in the data coming from the surveys can be seen also in the communiques of the terrorists on 4chan, 8chan, in social media, and also in the letters that they leave us after the attacks. What is very important when we think about anti-Semitism is its presence on internet. This is a study looking in Poland on the daily contact that people had with anti-Semitic contents on internet. And we did a study on a representative sample of adult Poles and of Polish teenagers. And you can see that from year 2014 to the year 2016, we had a rapid increase in the number of people who declared that they have seen anti-Semitic contents on internet. 28% of adults say they have seen anti-Semitic contents. It rises to 37% in 2016. From 58% of young people to more than 74%. These are increases that are very rare in survey research. It's very rare when we repeat survey studies that we observe these kind of increases. Here, you can see that this increase is visible, and it also reflects the reality in which especially young people today exist. After doing many studies on that, and this has been the main focus of my research for the last few years, we developed a model which we think explains what really happens today, not only in Poland, but also in other modern countries. People who are more exposed to online hate speech become less sensitive to hate speech. They tend to normalize hate speech. They think that hate speech is something usual, there's nothing wrong with it. They stop reacting emotionally to that. Once their sensitivity is decreased, they start using hate speech themselves. In the end, this makes them distance from Jews, and it makes them distance from all other minorities that are targeted by hate speech. So this is how the experiences from internet are translated into everyday behavior that people have. So what are the solutions? And I'm sure that here you're going to propose much more of them, but what are the solutions which, from most research that I know, could be suggested? First of all, increase the effectiveness of reporting and flagging offensive comments. And I hope that this hackathon will give us some good tools to be more effective in that. We know, for example, from the studies conducted by European Commission that now we are not doing so well with it. Awareness of politicians, so they do not use anti-Semitic comments and references to gain their electoral support. It's a very cheap way to get your voters vote on you, but this is like dirty money coming from diamond industry in places in Africa where people are working as slaves. These are just dirty money, and these are dirty votes. So I hope that politicians can be more responsible not to use this kind of comments. And finally, proper education, but not only education about the Holocaust. The Holocaust education will not solve the whole issue. People will not understand what did they lose if they are not educated also about the history of Jews in their home countries. So what the museum, the POLIN Museum, is doing in Poland, as well as many other institutions of education across Europe, is to teach about the history of Jewish communities and about how much did these countries lose because of anti-Semitism. I would like to thank you now, and I hope that this hackathon will bring even more solutions to the problem I've been talking about. Thank you.